Hey guys and gals, welcome to another episode of Mr. GM Fan. Well, today we've got another edition of the FURROW magazine. It's the Dairyland edition, February 1982. We've got a couple of really good articles that I'm going to share with you. Well, the first one is by Rex Gogerty. It's Milk 3 Times a Day. And that's a pretty interesting article that's near and dear to my heart. I remember our family discussing potentially moving to 3 times a day, and we opted not to. But this is a pretty compelling article, and I'm sure there's a lot of modern farms out there that are doing that or more. And the second article is Vegetable Oil as Diesel Fuel, a Progress Report. This is a report written by Rollie Henkes. So sit back, enjoy, and if I've got some time at the end, there's some pretty clever farm facts and fancies insights that I'll share with you as long as the video doesn't get too long. Thanks and enjoy. Milking 3 times a day by Rex Gogerty. Milking has traditionally been a morning and evening affair, but some dairymen are adding a shift to their schedule to increase production without increasing herd size. In general, 3 times a day milking works better with large herds, but regardless of the number of cows, there's a need for special management. Dairy scientists suggest placing only the top half of the herd on an accelerated schedule, and then only after you've controlled mastitis and other disease problems. They say it's also a good idea to check feed intake before and after the switch to make sure reproduction doesn't suffer from the change. Feed needs. John Riley, who milks 220 cows 3 times a day near Batavia, New York, works with dairy nutritionists at Cornell University to keep his cows on a fast track. For example, a cow producing more than 60 pounds of milk per day gets a total mixed ration containing up to 20 pounds per day of wet brewer's grains, 25 pounds of high moisture ground ear corn, and 6 pounds of soybean oil meal, plus buffers, lime, and trace mineralized salt. Riley uses a forage truck equipped with a digital readout scale box to get proper mixtures from bunkers to bins. It's still pretty much a least cost ration, Riley says. By grouping the cows and monitoring the rations, we're producing about 17,000 pounds of milk per cow per year, which is considerably more than we were getting on a twice-a-day schedule. Rich and Gerald Pearson, St. Peter, Minnesota, switched to 3 times milking for their 80-cow herd on registered Holsteins 2 years ago. They say their herd average has increased from 15,000 pounds of milk and 500 pounds of butterfat to 18,000 pounds of milk and 600 pounds of butterfat. The first year 20 cows peaked at over 100 pounds a day, Rich says. The big increase was in 2-year-old first calf heifers. They seem to thrive on lots of feed and producing more milk. Still, we've seen no signs of cows burning out. Less mastitis. In addition to higher production, the Pearsons noted a marked decrease in mastitis problems. They say this is probably due to less pressure on udders when milk is taken more often. Cows get better all-around care, Rich says. One reason is that they're being observed more. We catch more of them in heat, especially during the summer, and of course, we're more likely to be around when the calves are born. The Pearson milk at 7 a.m., 3 p.m., and 11 p.m. Rich does most of the milking, with Gerald taking every other late shift plus caring for crops on the 240-acre farm. Rich's kids take care of young stock and help in the parlor. Rich says family commitment is an important prerequisite for making 3 times milking work. Priorities. You have to establish priorities to make sure cows and the family are happy, Rich adds. We're careful to leave some time for television, ball games, and just an occasional evening away from the cows. John Riley hires 4 employees to help with his dairy operation. 2 handle the 1 p.m. and 9 p.m. milking. Riley and another employee take the 4:30 a.m. shift. The 4th employee helps with other livestock chores and crops. The added income justifies hiring extra help and working out daily shifts and schedules, Riley says. Doug Maddox, manager of the 1,700 herd Ruan Dairy at Riverdale, California, says it's especially important for dairymen switching to 3-time milking have a good relationship with employees. It's also important to keep equipment in top shape and maintain a high degree of sanitation, he adds. Without some pretty intensive management practices, 3 times a day milking will often fail within 6 months. Maddox says that the 3 times milking Ruan Dairy spends 10% more per cow per feed. Labor costs are up 50% more per cow, but the good news is he's getting 10 to 20% more milk from the herd. The rolling herd average, even with herd expansion, is now well above 22,000 pounds. No burnout. Maddox doesn't detect any signs of burnout. In fact, his culling rate has dropped from 31%, which was slightly above the state average, to 9% of the herd culled per lactation. Neil Quisenberry, manager of Agritech Analytics, a Tulare, California DHIA computer center, says dairymen may have to improve their ration savvy to maintain high levels of milk production over extended periods of 3 times milking. We already have the cow power genetically, Quisenberry points out. Our feeding technology needs to be improved substantially to hold on to those 80 to 85 pound herd wide averages we're getting the first 8 to 9 months of lactation with 3 milkings. Quisenberry also points out there's nothing magic about 3 times a day milking, nor is it for everyone. He says that unless your 12-month, twice a day milking average is at least 62 pounds per cow per day, you may not be ready for the switch to the fast lane. Like many other advances, 3 times a day milking requires higher management, he adds, but it can pay off in higher profits. Okay, the second article is some reflections and progress made with using vegetable oil as diesel fuel. It's basically a progress report, and this is again the perspective from February of 1982. This article again is written by Rollie Henkes. The future looks bright for burning vegetable oil in diesel engines, although there are good reasons right now why farmers shouldn't do it. Test engines on a steady diet of vegetable oil tend to develop various afflictions, including power stealing deposits on the injector needles, cylinder walls, and piston rings. Even worse, unburned oil has slipped into the crankcase to cause a thickening of the lubricating oil. The simple matter of price is another strike against vegetable oil. About the lowest price economists can quote for vegetable oil is $1.75 a gallon for sunflower oil grown and processed on the farm. But many people, scientists and farmers among them, haven't lost their enthusiasm for oilseed crops as a renewable energy source. Regional interests are looking hard at crops that fit their areas, including rapeseed, sunflower, safflower oil, soybeans, mustard, and peanuts. Net gain. What energy experts really like about oil seeds is that they generally yield more energy than is used to grow them. For instance, enough fuel can be pressed from the seed of 1 acre of sunflower to do all the field work for 8 to 10 acres. The ratio is still favorable if you add the energy used to produce the fertilizer, chemicals, machinery, and other inputs. Another plus for oil seeds is the oil extraction is fairly simple and inexpensive. A mechanical screw press will work for oil seeds such as sunflower, rape, and mustard. A turnkey, farm-size setup that would process about 94 pounds of sunflower seeds an hour would cost a farmer some $14,000, according to economists at North Dakota State University. This includes a seed cleaner and a filtering unit, but not the building. Soybeans require a more complex extraction process that involves chemicals, but the soybean industry is already geared up for this, so farmers should have no trouble buying soybean oil in bulk. Right now, there's a surplus of soybean oil. Some say we are already at the point where there were a severe shortage of petroleum, vegetable oils would give farmers a degree of energy self-sufficiency. But the furrow knows of no expert who would suggest a switch now. Engineers shudder to think of how the casual use of vegetable oil might affect engine warranties, to say nothing of the engines. If farmers did get the green light, it might only be for diesel fuel blends that contain no more than about one-third vegetable oil. With higher levels of vegetable oil in the fuel mixes, tests show that performance drops and there is a high risk of engine damage. The main reason is that vegetable oils are thicker than diesel fuel, causing poor atomization and incomplete combustion. At least this is the case with direct injection diesel engines. Engines with pre-combustion chamber indirect injection handle vegetable oils much better. However, most engines farmers use are direct injection. Long-term engine tests now underway should give more answers on burning blends. New forms. Some scientists are studying ways to modify crop oils to make them freer flowing, better burning fuels so they wouldn't have to be pre-mixed with diesel fuel. One process is called transistor fertification. It involves mixing vegetable oil with alcohol and a catalyst, then stirring and heating. A chemical reaction transfers the oil into an ester form, which is less viscous than unmodified crop oil. Transesterified vegetable oil has performed well in engines tests so far. A potential problem, however, is that it tends to solidify when temperatures drop below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. This quirk would require use of fuel heaters. Another way to brew a better vegetable oil might be with microemulsions. Shaving lotions and floor waxes are microemulsions, says A. W. Schwab, a chemist at the USDA Oilseeds Corporate Laboratory, Peoria, Illinois. We think the process has potential in modifying vegetable oils for fuel use. One formula Schwab is working with contains 4-part vegetable oil, 1.5 parts ethanol, basically 160 to 90 proof, plus a small amount of organic soap made from soybean oil. This mixture forms a microemulsion in which the alcohol is thoroughly and permanently dispersed through the vegetable oil in submicroscopic droplets. This reduces the viscosity of vegetable oil, and an early tests indicate the microemulsions perform on par with diesel fuel. How much vegetable oil can farmers grow for fuel? Agriculture consumes about 3.3 billion gallons of diesel fuel a year. That's the energy equivalent of 28 billion pounds of vegetable oil. That begs the question of what the annual U.S. production of vegetable oil is. Well, it's just about the same, 28.6 billion pounds in 1980, three-fourths of which was soybean oil. Even to supply 30% of agricultural fuel needs with vegetable oil would be no small order, although possible. Farmers now devote slightly more than 80 million acres to oilseed crops. To substitute vegetable oil at the 30% level, they would have to increase oilseed area by roughly 24 million acres at present yields. This assumes none of the current production would be diverted from food to fuel use. Idle cropland now totals about 21 million acres. It would put a strain on the nation's soil and water resources. On the other hand, devoting some cropland to vegetable oils for fuel could strengthen markets for farmers while ensuring that they would have enough fuel to produce the country's food. Again, this article was written by Rollie, Henkes. Okay, guys and gals, looks like we got a little extra time here. I'm going to read you a couple of the farm facts and fancies. The first one is right to farm laws enacted. Farmers in at least 2 states are now protected against suits by neighbors who object to odors, dust, noise, and other conditions that result from ordinary farming practices. A new law in Utah protects normal farm operations that have been carried on for at least 3 years. A similar statute in Michigan covers farmers judged to be operating in an acceptable manner. According to the Michigan's law sponsor, a farmer who uses best management practices recommended by the state's Department of Agriculture should have an airtight defense. The law is intended to protect farmers even when changes in the way surrounding properties is used might otherwise subject them to nuisance suits. MS patients get colostrum. Colostrum from cows injected weekly with measles, mumps, rubella, and canine distemper viruses during the last 6 weeks of pregnancy is being tested as a treatment for multiple sclerosis, MS, in humans. The idea is to use the cow's natural ability to develop immunity to disease and pass it on in colostrum. Scientists aren't sure what causes MS, but they believe it may be linked to measles. Don Hastings, a Bismarck, North Dakota veterinarian who first proposed the colostrum treatment, estimates that more than 1,200 individuals have tried it. About 30% reportedly showed dramatic improvement, and most seemed to improve at least somewhat during the treatment. Hastings cautions, however, that other factors could be responsible. Even without treatment, MS patients frequently go through periods of remission in which symptoms almost disappear. The next snippet I want to share with you is called Better Days Ahead. As we all know, the early 80s were a pretty tough time for the farming communities and the small to medium sized farms. Unfortunately, many farmers ended up either going bankrupt, selling out, etc. So I think this was kind of a pep talk to to the furrow reader, and basically telling him that hang on and be positive. It's entitled Better Days Ahead. The immediate economic outlook may not seem all that rosy to many farmers, but some economists are saying that a new era of agriculture prosperity isn't far off. The prediction is based on the assumption that food output will not grow as rapidly as population and demand for food. Farmers have heard similar predictions before, perhaps so often they no longer pay much attention to talk about gearing up to feed a hungry world. What makes the talk more believable now is the energy situation. Rising energy prices are expected to limit growth of food output by restricting the use of yield boosters like pump irrigation and farm chemicals. Economists also expect that continued conversion of farmland to non agricultural uses will slow the expansion of farm production. On the demand side, economists look not only for more people to feed, but also higher per capita incomes. Developing countries should be able to buy more food, increasing international trade. Use of agricultural products for fuel also could increase overall demand for farm output. According to at least one leading agricultural economist, the combination of forces could lead within a few years to a period of agricultural prosperity unprecedented in this century. It always amazes me when I'm reading these articles from the 1980s how accurate some of the predictions were. It did take quite a few years for some of these things to come true, but excellent foresight by the writers of the furrow that John Deere hired to do this. Well, back in 1982, score one for eggs. Tests conducted by a California research team showed that eating eggs had no effect on cholesterol levels in a group of young and middle-aged men. This contradicts some previous studies, but the subjects in some of those earlier studies were fed synthetic or cholesterol-free diets before they were fed high cholesterol foods. For the study, the California researchers selected males who normally ate eggs and who had normal serum cholesterol and blood pressure levels. They found that healthy young men eating 2 eggs a day and a healthy middle-aged men eating 1 egg a day, in addition to their usual cholesterol-containing diet, showed no significant change in serum cholesterol levels over a period of 8 weeks. Herbicides go underground. Scientists with the USDA and Texas Agricultural Experiment Station are trying to kill mosquitoes and other rangeland weeds by injecting herbicides into the ground with a subsoiler. The injector system is said to eliminate spray drift and improve water infiltration. It might be especially useful where aerial or ground spraying is risky because of surrounding sensitive vegetation. Further tests are needed, however, before applying herbicides with a subsoiler is ready for commercial use. One thing, the herbicides tested are still experimental. All right, guys and gals, that's going to wrap it up for this week's Mr. GM Fan video. Hope you guys really enjoyed listening to some of the articles out of the Furrow. That's a magazine. It's basically a publication and advertisement that John Deere produced, printed, and sent out to their customers. It always amazes me how accurate some of the predictions were in terms of content. Maybe not so much timing, but based on some of the new technologies and the fellows that produce them, as well as new farming methods, insecticides, chemicals that were coming to the market, and the ones that were potentially going to be banned. It always amazes me how a lot of these articles predicted some futures that did in fact come true. But again, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Happy Memorial Day weekend, everyone. Hopefully, you'll be able to spend some time with your friends and family. And also, don't forget to honor the fallen soldiers of the United States, as well as any family members that have passed on to heaven's gates. Don't forget to think about them, and maybe even kind of spruce up the gravesite with some flowers. I know that's typically what we do. Anyway, again, have a wonderful weekend. God bless everyone and enjoy. And also, please comment on the articles that you've listened to. I truly enjoy reading your comments. A lot of them are really the highlights and the reason why I do these videos. Thanks again, and God bless.